This is The Shift, Stories of Resistance and Resilience, a multi-platform conversation series produced and hosted by Mark Travis Rivera, the professional storyteller. I believe that we must embrace the power of stories to create a more inclusive world. So this series aims to share perspectives, insights, and stories from professionals around the world about the role that resistance and resilience plays in our personal and professional lives. So, tune in, listen up, take notes, and recognize our shared humanity. This is The Shift. Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Shift, Stories of Resistance and Resilience. I'm your host and producer, Mark Travis Rivera. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the CEO and founder of The Professional Storyteller, where I embrace the power of stories to create a more inclusive world. And I do this through 5 pillars of activities: choreography, coaching, consulting, speaking, and writing. And I am super thrilled. First and foremost, happy Pride. This episode is being recorded towards the end of Pride Month, but it may not come out until July. But if you're hearing this at the time of the recording, it is Pride Month, so happy Pride, y'all. And happy Disability Pride as well for those who may be celebrating in July. And, there's so much going on in the world, and we are all trying to just human well, to quote my good friend Amber Cabral, and get through it the best way we know how. And today's guest is someone who reminds me that sometimes we gotta take it just one day at a time, because the journeys that life takes us on is not always easy, but they're always transformative. Today's guest is a colleague, someone who I consider a dear friend, who I can't wait to spend more time with now that we both live in Atlanta. Gabrielle Claiborne is the co-founder and CEO of Transformation Journeys Worldwide, an inclusion training and consulting firm with a focus on transgender and gender expansive individuals. Her award-winning and certified LGBT business enterprise consultancy helps cutting-edge organizations create fully trans-inclusive workplace cultures. Some of her clients include Home Depot, UPS, Mercedes-Benz, Bank of America, Royal Bank of Canada, Comcast, the Grammys, Microsoft, HubSpot, Delta Airlines, Papa John's, the Center for Disease Control, and more. She has served or currently serves as co-chair of the National LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce Transgender Expansion Initiative and co-chair of the Trans Affairs Committee on the City of Atlanta's LGBTQ Mayoral Advisory Council, as secretary of the Out Georgia Business Alliance, and as chair of the Transgender X360 Workplace and Entrepreneurship Initiative, and as chair of the International LGBTQ Travel, IGLTA Foundation's Gender Diverse Travel Advisory Group. And if she's not busy enough, she managed to write a book in 2020 when she wrote her memoir-meets-self-help book, Embrace Your Truth, A Journey of Authenticity. In 2019, the Atlanta Business Chronicle acknowledged her as their Diversity and Inclusion Outstanding Voice Award recipient, and she delivered a TEDx talk for Centennial Park Women TEDx. In 2018, Gabrielle received the Georgia Small Business Administrative LGBT Small Business Champion Award in recognition of her efforts in advancing LGBT business ownership. In 2015, Gabrielle was chosen as Atlanta's best trans activist, and her work has been featured in Forbes and the Atlanta Business Chronicle. And she is my guest today on The Shift. Welcome, Gabrielle. How are you?
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be here and great to be back here because we were together a year or so ago and just absolutely love the conversation. I always enjoy my time with you.
Likewise. That's why I knew I had to bring you back. I was like, if there's anyone that I have to actually come back this season to talk about trans issues, I have to bring you in. And we saw each other, I think the most recently, was it the HRC dinner?
It was
not the HRC.
At the City Hall here in Atlanta.
Yes, it was Trans Day of Remembrance event.
Transgender Day of Visibility event.
Trans Day of Visibility event on March 31st at City Hall.
Yes.
And I saw you there. Of course, you stand out in any crowd because you're a statuesque goddess, and I love that about you. And
Thank
I
you.
always feel extra tiny around you, but it's okay. I love looking up to you in so many ways. I have to ask you,
I think we're on the same level, my friend.
and I have to ask you, in in terms of who you are outside of those, because I read so many professional highlights of
Yeah,
yours.
yeah.
But I have to ask you because this is about humanizing our stories and what we go through. It's not just a leadership podcast or a business podcast. This is a podcast or a multi-platform series about the human experience and our shared humanity, and we do that through storytelling. So, who are you outside of the professional highlights I read in your bio?
Well, you just took the word right out of my mouth. I am first and foremost a human being that wants to have a chance to not only survive in this world, but flourish and thrive. And part of me flourishing and thriving means that I show up as a parent of three kids, a grandparent of three grandchildren, a fiance in love with a wonderful man. Um,
Oh, that's breaking news for me. Well, I don't know where I've
I
been, but
know,
congratulations.
I know. I'm a mentor. I am a coach. I'm an activist. I'm a published author, as you mentioned. And I think, Mark, when folks try to understand, can I really lean into a conversation with someone who has, and I really try to stay away from this word different lived experience. I like to use unique because difference kind of creates immediately an us and them reality. And I'm wanting to break the us and them dynamic down and say, you can approach me because I'm safe.
Yeah,
If you're courageous and vulnerable enough to get to know me, you just might find out that we have more in common than not. So,
absolutely.
so I feel like as we elevate our intersectional aspects that we embody as human beings, hopefully
Mhm.
we have a chance to help folks understand that you don't need to be afraid of us. We are not taking anything away from you. We are not invalidating your lived experience any more so than you're invalidating my lived experience as a trans
Yeah.
person, you know? So I think that's who I am. I continue to show up in this world in many different ways. As you read in my bio, there's a lot of work that I do in my volunteer work and in my vocational work. So yeah, that's how I show up, and I'm showing up every day. I'm trying to be relevant and upright, despite all that's going around us in the world, just to spread a little light, joy, and love around.
Yeah. And I think you said this before we started the recording, which was, you're taking it day by day,
Yeah, yeah.
And I wonder, what does joy feel like in this moment?
Joy to me in this moment feels like, one, I'm always a purpose driven person, Mark. I need to feel like I am making a difference in the world. And because of all of the dynamics that are happening around us of fear, division, divisiveness, I think part of this joy is breaking down some myths that are out there that exist around misunderstandings and lack of knowing a person at the depth of their essence. Joy right now is breaking down those myths, speaking to those assumptions and mis and disinformation. The rhetoric is, just running rampant in our culture. Joy is speaking truth to all of that. I think another aspect of joy for me is owning my space and making sure that I'm staying true and grounded in the things that I know that I need to stay engaged,
Yeah.
in my relationships, in my work, in my volunteer work. And that takes a lot of effort, especially when everything is, all the outside noise is coming at you saying, you're wrong, you don't have a right to exist, and we're going to do everything we can to try to eradicate you from existence. When you're trying to find the joy in that midst, it's kind of hard, right? So I'm trying to stay grounded in making sure that I do the things that I need at a personal level to stay engaged and to stay relevant in this work.
Yeah. And I have to ask you, what is your personal concept of resistance and resilience? Because I know how much I read your book. I've had the privilege of having multiple
Yeah,
conversations over dinner and coffee and events about your journey of becoming who you are,
yeah,
becoming, the most authentic version of yourself.
yeah,
And I have to ask, because right now it doesn't feel very much like a celebratory time, right? It feels like pride is in many ways having to return to its origin of it being a riot, a protest, rather than a celebration or a party of progress made. And you and I both know that what's happening in this country right now has life or death consequences for people.
yeah.
Not just queer people and bisexual people and queer youth, but trans adults, trans youth, right? Non-binary folks, gender expansive folks, even someone like me who identifies as a man who's gender non-conforming. Depending on what I'm wearing, using the bathroom in public in the South
Yeah.
can be a very dangerous experience,
Target.
right? We all have a target on our back, and we have a target on our back simply because we dared to be our authentic self.
Right.
If me showing up in a dress and wearing nails and makeup is not causing you any harm, right? It may cause discomfort, but your personal discomfort with my truth does not validate your need to kill or attack me, right?
Well,
Your
not
discomfort, your
according.
attraction,
Yeah, yeah, not according to some folks, Mark. Unfortunately.
right. But when did discomfort become a cause for death, a
Well,
cause for murder and attacking someone? Never, right? But it's happened.
no, I know when it became that. It became that when I believe what resistance means to me. I'll get to your question. What
Yeah.
resistance means to me is I believe one of our superpowers as human beings is being visible. Because until we are bringing the best version of ourselves, our most
Hmm.
authentic self, which is another message that I embrace, another concept that I embrace as my message. We are not the best version to the people around us, but when we choose to finally be the best version of ourselves, what that does is, as a result of the hard and just ugly work that we have to do to get to the place of being visible, to being relevant, what we
Yeah.
do is when we walk in the room and we're usually the only one like us in the room, we bring up everything in folks that they're afraid to face in themselves, right?
Mm.
So the pushback that I feel like are receiving as the queer and trans and LGBTQIA2S plus community is we are we're we're silently forcing other people to get honest with themselves.
Mm.
Often I just did a LinkedIn post today about this. Oftentimes when somebody experiences a person or a situation that is different from their personal beliefs, and perhaps brings up some fear, mistrust, and uncertainty, our immediate response is to lash out and project onto them, right?
Mm.
There's a spiritual saying that goes like this: love brings up anything unlike itself for the sake of healing. And so I believe what we need to do as human beings, as a culture that is looking for an answer for us to connect with our neighbor and not feel like our neighbor is taking something away from us or as a threat to us, is we have to ask the question, what is this person or situation? Why is it bringing up this response in me? Start the work with ourselves. Okay.
Yeah.
My form of resistance is starting with myself. If I feel uncomfortable in a situation, before I project or confront a situation, which more times than not is is not civil and is not respectful because I'm
Hmm.
projecting, right? I start with myself, center myself into my feelings and say, okay, I got to come to terms with this before I can engage with this person. When
Yeah.
we are courageous, vulnerable, and honest enough to do that, I feel like, Mark, we can approach our neighbor in a civil and respectful way and know that you were never a threat to me.
Right.
The big threat was me not coming to terms with what I needed to do, the work that I needed to do on myself. So resistance for me is starting with myself, doing my work, and inviting others to do the same thing.
Yeah. And that becomes your form of resisting. You're resisting the need to react, to project, right? You're doing the internal work to make sure that you're showing up and communicating in the way that feels genuine, authentic, and productive. Yvonne and I kicked off this year's The Shift series talking about reconciling with the fact that we have relatives and friends and colleagues who voted for Trump.
Mhm.
And that at the time, to your point earlier, it was a lot of us versus them mentality. And that's what they want us to keep doing. They want to keep pitting ourselves against each other because we're so busy fighting each other and our difference that we're not paying attention to how they're disrupting social safety nets, how they're laying off federal employees, how he's about to embark on a World War III with Iran, right? And all of these things is all meant to overwhelm us and distract us and to make us feel disempowered, because a disempowered society is not a society that will fight to maintain its democracy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I think there is so much power in what you represent. There's always been power in what you represent, but even more so now, right? Your ability to show up and do the hard thing, even when it feels even harder than normal,
Yeah.
right? Or even harder than usual. And,
And those hard and those hard things, Mark, by the way, are in my book. I've written my memoir around not only my lived experience as a trans person, but an invitation to people. If you want to be the best version of yourself, consider reading my book because it
yeah,
is more than just a trans story. It is
yeah,
a human story, right? So, yeah, I mean, I talk about the importance of loving ourselves, the importance of listening to your heart, the importance of forgiveness. Oh my God, Mark, our culture could go through some serious forgiveness work right now, right?
yeah,
But it's scary, it's hard, and we have to confront ourselves in this work, right?
no,
How to avoid or prepare for pushback. Okay. And this is where we are. We're in the midst of people pushing back on people's right to exist,
yeah,
right? How do you prepare for pushback? And then
yeah,
and the other thing is living your life out loud, inside out loud, unapologetically, without allowing others' expectations to be imposed on you. And then how do you live a purposeful life? Those are the things that I talk about in my book. And I feel
yeah,
like it now more than ever, it's relevant, for
yeah,
us
absolutely.
to be unpacking those things. So anyway,
And we'll be,
I don't want
and
to
we'll be,
throw my book in there.
yeah, absolutely. Well, and we'll be sure to add the link to your book,
Yeah.
in our show notes for you and for our audience. And Gabrielle, this is another important question: is as we experience an increased attack, especially on trans people and our fundamental human rights over the last year or so, even before then, it kind of feels like the progress we made over the last 50 years or so feels a little bit more meaningless to me now. How do you How do you decide to continue to be yourself despite all that's going on? Because for me, authenticity is a daily choice. Every day I choose to be myself. How do you make that choice every day, given the climate that we're in?
Well, let me first say this, Mark. This is not a new moment in history. This is another moment in history. Okay? We have seen history repeat itself. And unfortunately, for many of us, we do not do well in learning from history. And that's why history repeats itself, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like, when we talk about the power of authenticity, Mark, I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of folks think about authenticity in the context of what does it mean for me? Meaning a personal attachment to authenticity. But what we have to understand is authenticity is much bigger than ourselves, right? When we choose to be the best version of ourselves, we make everyone around us braver, right?
Mm.
Executive coach Hina Anam says this, and I share this in my authentic leadership keynote. Authenticity is the full expression of me for the benefit of we. And
Mm.
how I and why I stay engaged is because I know the conversation is much bigger than just me.
Yeah.
Okay. I am a drop in the ocean, but I'm also hoping that I make as impactful as a change when all those drops come together collectively and say,
Yeah.
you know, we don't live our lives just for ourselves. We don't go through what we go through just to benefit ourselves. I'm at this place in my life, Mark, where I have been fortunate and so blessed to accomplish some very wonderful things in my life. But I'm now at this place of saying, this is not just about me anymore. This is an invitation to other people of how can I lift you up? How
Yeah.
can I elevate your message? How
Yeah.
can I put you on that stage? How
Yeah.
can I get you into a place where you can live your life without fear or trepidation? How can
Yeah.
I be instrumental in you getting access to health care that is affirming to you, right? How can I help position you for employment in a way that you can not only show up as your authentic self, but contribute, bring your
Right.
expertise and lived experience to that space, right? I am in this place of paying it forward, leaving a legacy,
Yeah.
understanding that this life that I'm living is much more bigger than me.
Yeah. And I just watched the Tell Me Everything documentary about Barbara Walters. Anyone who knows me knows The View is my favorite daytime talk show. I've been watching it since I was a young child,
Yeah,
long before I had any business watching it. Barbara Walters and Oprah Winfrey were my first journalism teachers in life. And so much of what I do and the ethos in which I do it is because of their teachings, their examples. And this idea on the drop in the ocean, a drop in the bucket. What happens when you splash water or drop water into a bigger body of water? It ripples. There's ripple
yes,
effects.
yes,
And you and I choosing to be ourselves every single day, making that choice, because it is a choice.
yeah.
We could have chosen to stay hidden.
An act of resistance, like you said.
Right, and active resistance, right? You and I could have chosen not to be authentic,
Yeah,
and our lives would have looked very different
yeah,
if we were still alive to see it.
yeah, yeah,
Because we know what happens to young people and queer folks and trans folks when they can't live in their truth.
yeah,
There's enough study and data out there to tell us what happens.
right.
And when I say we are living in a life or death situation, sometimes some of my straight relatives don't understand. They're like, oh, you're gainfully employed as a full time entrepreneur. You're having all these opportunities. It doesn't seem like your identity is hurting you.
Right.
And I said, every day I deal with some form of homophobia, whether it's a microaggression, an overt aggression, whether it's the threat of physical violence, whether I'm being harassed online, right? There is some form in which I'm dealing with queerphobia and transphobia, right? And that does something to the human psyche,
Yeah,
right? It does something when we're made to feel less than human, right? They're dehumanizing us because people don't care about human rights for those who have been dehumanized, right? And it's more now than ever. It's important that you and I keep telling our stories and keep sharing our stories because you're right. Our stories can serve as a window or a mirror that allows others to see the possibility of their visibility, right? Through our visibility, a window for those who may not be queer or trans, but want to better understand our lived experience and see how there may be synergy between our lived experiences, right? Because at the end of the day, we all want to feel a sense of love and belonging,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like I wrote yesterday after watching the Barbara Walters documentary, I said, I don't want my career to be the love of my life because I love my work, and I do. I give so much to what I do, and I never regret it, except when I'm experiencing major career milestones and I don't have someone romantically to share that experience
yeah,
with.
To celebrate it with you.
celebrate with me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I will say, and I feel guilty sharing this, but I think it's important to share because I'm doing my part to give back. Despite all the mayhem that's going on, I'm seeing record growth in my business this year.
Yeah.
We crossed the six-figure mark this year for the first time. I I'm growing. The team went from one part-time consultant role to now we're bringing in. We have two right now. We are bringing in a third in mid-July. I'm experiencing rapid growth in ways that I can't even articulate.
Yeah.
In ways I dreamt of this. I cried for this. I prayed for this. I was at Q1 felt like I was planting seeds and watering them with my tears. And Q2 came in like a tsunami that says, "Here is your harvest. What will you do to honor it?"
Yeah.
Right. And so what I've done in this season of reaping my harvest is I've given back.
Yeah.
I've given to people who are less fortunate or going through a hard time. I've checked in on people. I've given free coaching sessions. I've checked people's resumes. I've made connections. I've made introductions, right? Because I know that a lot of people are struggling right now. And I know that I'm never too far removed from the struggle.
Yeah.
Because when you grow up as poor as I did, Oprah said there's poor and there's poor. And I grew up poor. You know what I'm saying? And I recognize that. And one of the ways that, my culture and growing up working class taught me is that I may not have much, but I always have enough food to give you. I always have something to give you,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's a couch, my bed, a place to shower, some money, even if not a lot, right? A meal, a home cooked meal, a nice cocktail or martini,
Yeah.
right? A listening ear, empathy. And I think more now than ever, we need to be there for each other. We need to lock arms around each other and say, we may not agree on everything, but the human in me acknowledges the human in you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to say one more thing, Mark, about this how do you stay engaged question.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like, to your point, I love that you brought up this point about division and divisiveness begets more division and divisiveness, right? And if we're not careful as strategically undervalued people of a strategically undervalued demographic, we're not careful, we're going to get sucked into the same cycle that people are trying to use against us,
Yeah.
right? And one of the things that I have really observed and am learning is that not everybody is ready to be a student.
Mm.
Not everybody is ready to be a student because being a student is hard work, right? So, in those moments of pushback and accusation and attack, as opposed to lashing out and reciprocating the same kind of treatment that you're receiving from others, I want to ask the question, is your resistance to that, what is that doing? Is that
Mm.
making any kind of progress or headway in
Yeah.
the humanity, or developing this level of humanity that we're all striving to achieve, right?
Yeah.
I feel like we, as people who are being attacked, we have to recognize the student and the bully. Okay? When the student is ready, the teacher will come. We know that saying. But if the bully is there and persistent in saying, I'm not willing to learn, I'm not willing to be curious and open up my mind and heart and consider things that are new and different,
Mm-hmm.
then what I feel like we should do is look, acknowledge the situation for what it is, step back, disengage from that person, don't lash out, don't throw them under the bus, disengage and send them on their way in
Yeah.
hopes that somewhere down the road they will have another touch, an invitation to lean in and learn. And if
Yeah.
people think that's too passive, Mark, they don't really understand, quite with all due respect, how the universe works. The
Mm.
universe will continue hounding you until you learn your lesson. There will
Yeah.
be invitation after invitation come your way. And
My dating life is proof of that.
yeah, and I could share many examples in my own life
Yeah.
that's proof of that. But I
Yeah.
feel like we need to focus on the people that are willing to lean in and listen with ears to hear, eyes to see, hearts to understand, and hopefully feet to take action. Right?
Amen.
So I feel like we need to exercise our own discipline and commitment to our own self-care and self-love and say, look, if you're not willing to learn, it's okay, because there's someone who is, and I'm going to focus my efforts and attention on that.
Yeah. In closing, because I know we're almost out of time, I have to ask you this, because I asked every guest this last question. What do you hope to shift in society through your work, Gabrielle? I mean, I feel like you've done so much for us, especially in the city of Atlanta. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I meet with folks and they're like, "Oh, I know her and she does amazing work and I'm so glad she's in our city and I wish I could be her friend." I'm like, "Well, I'm kind of her friend and we kind of hang out every
Oh,
once in a while."
stop that. You're more than kind of.
And I was like, "I love her. She's awesome." And like, so it's like it's one of those things where it's like, I just feel very honored that I get to exist in your orbit, especially as someone who's newer to Atlanta, right? Because I'm not as connected as you are to the city, but I think you and I both love the city down and we love our
Yeah,
community. We love the work we do. And so what do you hope to shift in society through your work?
great question. And I have hopefully a relevant answer for that. And that is this. You know, organizations they have been very focused on fostering conversations and spaces of inclusion, safety, and belonging. And while that has been a very meaningful and needed focus, okay, I think with where we're living now, today, we got to push the envelope a little further and go beyond inclusion, safety, and belonging and foster spaces of knowing. And what I mean by knowing is get to know someone who has a unique lived experience compared to
Mm,
you. Okay? I came across this amazing passage, To Be Known, by George Orwell. And I encourage those who are listening to this podcast to look up that passage. George Orwell talks about the difference it is to be seen and surrounded by people versus being known by people. A lot of times we press our hands against the glass, hoping people see us for who we are, only to watch them walk by and not feel this connection with them. So
mm,
I feel like my hope, what I want to see shifted, is people willing to be courageous enough with themselves and with one another and say, let me get to know you, because
yeah.
I want to know the essence of your humanity. I don't want to just be an ally who does what I do because I know that's the right thing to do. I want to be an ally who is this kind of ally who becomes an ally that leads with a heart. This
Yeah.
work that we're doing, Mark, is from the heart. It's hard
Yeah.
work. It's
It's hard.
courageous work. So
It's hard and it's heart work.
hard
Yeah.
and hard work. So lean in and get to know someone who might be different from you.
I love that. And, I want you, everyone who's listening to this podcast, first and foremost, please share and rate this podcast. If you like it. If you don't like it, don't bother rating it. But if you like this podcast, I encourage you to rate it and share it and follow it wherever you listen to your podcast, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, because it helps the podcast get more exposure and it helps people who need to hear these conversations hear these stories. And I want to encourage you all to connect with Gabrielle. I will add her social media, her website, her LinkedIn, all that will be in the show notes, as well as the link to her book. And I want to encourage you to heed the advice of our guest today. Take a moment, meet someone you don't know, someone who's very different from you, who's unique from you,
Yeah.
and get to know their story. And I promise you, somewhere along the thread of you actively listening to their story, you will see a part of your humanity reflected back at you. Because there is more that connects us than divides us. It is more important than ever for us to wrap our arms or limbs around each other and say, I got your back. Thank you, Gabrielle, for being a guest. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for being my colleague. I am
Back at you.
always blessed to be in your presence. And I can't wait to catch up on a personal note about this engagement, which I'll ask you after we stop this recording. So again, be sure to like, rate, share, subscribe, and share this podcast with a person in your life who you think just needs to be given some encouragement and some tools about how to show up and learn about people who are different. Because I bet you, despite the media representation and the political landscape right now, there are people out there who simply don't know how to listen and how to show up for each other. And they just need this encouragement. And Gabrielle has dropped some amazing gems in this episode. So be sure to share, rate, subscribe, follow, etc. You know what to do. And be sure to follow and connect with Gabrielle's work. And I just want to thank you all so much for being here. Be well. And until next time, this is The Shifts.